it would only be 5 times the commercial and broadcast revenue of the lowest team in the division. Wow, that actually so it's like 5 times the revenue and broadcast of like a championship level club, I feel like.
The cap, if anchoring was in effect last season, the cap would have been 518 million, 5 times the 103 that Southampton, who finished 20th, earned.
I mean, that's not a ton of money for what we see Premier League teams spend, but there's going to be some.
But I think it's estimated Premier League squad costs 22-23. Chelsea was the only one higher at 539. City was at 501.
And I mean, like, what is Chelsea doing with that money anyway?
Literally nothing.
All right.
Oh, let's see. All that 2/3. So 14-6. Majority of the clubs is needed to change the rule book.
So you need 14 clubs. I mean,
all this is for the future, as the first hurdle that anchoring must clear is finding sufficient support within the Premier League, where a 2/3, 14-6 majority of the clubs is needed to change the rule book.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll dive into that then, I guess. All right. You ready?
Yep.
All right. 3. Oh, no, that. Sorry. I'm 3, 2, 1. MLS Aces Podcast, episode 290. This is your host, Tom Sweezy, once again joined by Jason Vivang. Jason, weird week, interesting week. I feel like we talk about some things going on around U.S. soccer, but first and foremost,
hey, the more we can not talk about certain on-field
issues,
the better.
Yeah, exactly, right? But how are you doing today, man?
I'm good, man. It's another week going by, 290 episodes later. We're chilling, I mean, Actually, for me, it probably wasn't that. It's like 240 or something.
You're close enough to that number. You're close enough. I'm not even at 290, so it's okay. But I mean, you're chilling after witnessing Chicho Arango absolutely put the smackdown on you guys live. I mean, I just want
to at least you get your expectations ruined now, right? Like now I can just enjoy the season. Fuck it.
Enjoy the season knowing the Fire arguably might
be dead in the water. Like, thank God New England exists.
I'm just giving you the time now to let this out because I don't think we're going to talk much.
I don't want to talk about it. I'm good, man. It was a horror. No, we're not going to even go there. Everybody knows what it was. Anyone who you just go look at the score of the Fire game, and then you'll know the reaction. I don't think that they were home, by the way, for people who were just looking it up. Looking it up now, going, what must have happened in that game? Surely nothing that bad.
Sorry, fellow Fire fans, to Jason. You guys, I think, are clearly a bottom 3 team right now. I would put the votes in for that. But let's start with some non-MLS news, but definitely has points of Major League Soccer, I think, to talk about here. So The Athletic recently dropped an article on the 24th May. It's May, right? We're in May. Yeah, May 24th. It's April. Jesus Christ. I don't even know what month we're in.
What?
April 24th.
You're confusing me.
That a majority of Premier League clubs, English Premier League clubs want to introduce a hard spending cap, and that the motion will be voted upon this upcoming Monday. The cap will allow clubs to spend 5 times the commercial and broadcast revenue of the lowest team in the division. And we'll kind of dive into that wording a little bit. But the more interesting thing, I think, in terms of talking about it in the MLS span is Tom Bogert, obviously someone over at The Athletic, retweeted this and said, when people ask me if MLS will ever get rid of a salary cap, my response is always, it is more significantly likely that Europe adopts a salary cap than MLS abolishes it. Obviously, plenty of room in the middle to take rules away and increase spending, but there will always be a cap. So I think it's something that we've always talked about in the sense of MLS, when are they going to get rid of the salary cap, or when are they going to open up that cap way more for, us to be able to compete in a CONCACAF level, global level, whatever it may be. I just think this is an interesting piece that we're talking about, I guess from whoever's viewpoint it is, arguably the greatest soccer league on the planet, they're potentially introducing their own version of a salary cap that would limit tons of spending within the league. I mean, I know you took a dive into the article a little bit more than I did. So what's your take on this right now?
I mean, I personally think like you're saying that there's never going to be MLS getting rid of a salary cap. And in some ways, I think the argument against the salary cap isn't that great because it provides so much more parity into the league. From the Premier League standpoint, it essentially like basically this anchoring or whatever means that the cap would be 5 times that of the 20th team or the lowest amount paid in the Premier League for that season. So I guess in this article they mentioned last season with Southampton, they had 103.6 million. So 5 times that would be like 518 million, which based on the chart that they have in their article, really it's only Chelsea that have gone above that.
Yes.
So in terms of that, like I think it's a good idea because then you will probably get a little bit more parity, but it's still like it's not going to drastically change the way the league operates. Honestly, like most people probably wouldn't even know it was happening, right? Outside of like very rare scenario where Chelsea goes and is obviously spending a crazy amount of money, which everyone already knows, right? They spent like $1 billion on their team. You know, they're paying the wages, at least on this listed at like 539 million, which is transfer fees. Basically what he puts is squad costs equals first team wage bill, amortized transfer fees, and agent payments. So all of that combined. And I think it won't necessarily change things immediately, but I think it's a pretty fair proposal and one that's probably in the right direction. Like you're saying, Tom Bogert was saying, like this is far more likely of something like this happening in Europe or in the Premier League rather than MLS just throwing everything away. But I think from the MLS perspective, I don't know if we're asking necessarily to get rid of the salary cap entirely versus just opening it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like this system is actually a pretty great system. Like based on the very minimal article, it seems like it's pretty solid. So I think just having a better system in MLS in place where they can compete, where we're not looking at CONCACAF Champions Cup and just going like, how do we even compete with some of these teams? They're bringing people off the bench that are far superior or getting paid way more, or whatever the case may be. Like we go back and forth and talk about this all the time. And it's just like the competition, I think MLS should want to grow. And I think that part of that is through spending. I mean, I think most of that probably is, and this is like at least an alternative option to what they're doing now. And obviously we talked about last week with some roster changes coming into effect that they're taking the right steps. I think this Premier League proposal is actually pretty interesting though, at least as another perspective.
I would be interested because, right, like I think this is probably, if this gets passed, let's just say for whatever potential future we're going to make up here, if this thing gets passed, I think it almost sets a precedent for how Major League Soccer should aim to operate and to open up their spending, right? Because it's not that salary cap equals bad league or bad, way of maneuvering or anything like that to many of the points that you just stated. But it's like especially with the Apple TV deal, because if we're talking about broadcast revenue and everything to that extent, if we're talking, right, like last season, Toronto FC, worst team in the league, I would be interested to see in a comparison, like if it was even 3 times the broadcast revenue and commercial revenue of like Toronto FC last year, what that would potentially look like. I'm not saying that would actually maybe be a good number or a bad number.
Well, yeah, I think in MLS we would for sure have to play with the numbers a little bit. I don't know if it would be as clean as this proposal is. But I do think, like, I don't know if they're going to nail this on the first try either. Like this on paper looks pretty interesting, and it could be a step to something, but who knows, right? Like, I don't know if that's going to be perfect on the first try. It might be horrible and they have to revise it, but at least it's a step in that direction that MLS can look at and be like, how are we able to innovate or change our system or model to improve the whole league, right? Like the whole purpose of this is to just make leagues better, more competitive, kind of more fair in terms of like that level, but while also keeping it like, hey, if that owner wants to go, I mean, even in the NHL, the NBA, they have hard salary caps and soft caps, and if you are willing to pay like luxury tax, you can. Like the Bulls haven't done that in I want to say like ever, honestly. Like I can't remember the last time they went over the pay the luxury tax. Whereas like teams like Golden State in the NBA who've won multiple championships are frequently way over it. So it still comes down to like what are the owners going to want to spend, and this at least makes it so there is some type of cap where it's like, the Southamptons or I don't know, Fulham isn't even able to spend on the level of some of these teams.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I just think it's an interesting point to bring up. And I think, again, if this gets passed, or even if it doesn't get passed, a version of it gets passed, whatever it may be, it's definitely going to impact how Don Garber, the MLS owners, and everyone kind of involved higher up, I think, decide to maneuver or operate in the future. And maybe, again, like you said, Jason, innovate and kind of improve how these clubs are run, how the league is run financially, and everything.
And this will impact all of Europe, France,
100%.
Germany, all
Premier
of that
League
will be impacted.
does it.
Yeah.
Honestly, the only league that I feel like wouldn't just follow suit is probably La Liga, because
well, they have their own issues,
Yeah, they have their
issues
own
top to bottom. So,
but yes, so I think for the most part, right, if England does this and this goes down from the Premier League down to League One, League Two, and probably the non-professional leagues or whatever below that, you'll see this spread out throughout the Netherlands, Portugal, Belgium, everything that you could probably imagine. But let's move forward. I thought that was just an interesting point to initially bring up here, and maybe something that pushes MLS into roster spending rules differently much sooner than we even hoped for, expected, whatever.
I kind of think they're on the track, at least in MLS, to be making these changes regardless, honestly. Like
I just think this could expedite things a little bit faster.
Yeah. I mean, I think having one of arguably the biggest league in the world make a change like that would push other leagues to think about it.
Yeah. No, I agree with you for sure. All right. I'm going to run through some transfer news, Jason. You interrupt me if there's something you want to say about some of these people, because if fans didn't know, you're new to the league, whatever, the transfer window is still technically open for MLS clubs right now, and it does close relatively soon. So we are going to see a flurry of moves kind of pop up before, again, we get a transfer window opening in like 2.5 months or something, because that's how Major League Soccer works. But the Colorado Rapids, they are sending U.S. Youth International goalkeeper Adam Beaudry over to Arsenal for a training stint. He's only 18 years old. He's a highly rated goalkeeper kind of globally. Apparently, many clubs abroad are already aware of Beaudry. I guess technically the Rapids did not have to let him go on a stint on a trial, but he is. And, good for the kid to go get a shot over in Europe and impress, and maybe a payday for the Rapids sooner rather than later on that front. Let's go to some news today. Toronto FC, they've acquired winger Derrick Etienne Jr. from Atlanta United for $200,000 in general allocation money and potential for another $175,000 in GAM if certain incentives are hit. Shout out to our guy, Derrick Etienne Jr., friend of the pod, literally for sure. 27-year-old winger. He's won pretty much everything you can think of in Major League Soccer. He's an MLS Cup champ, Supporter Shield, Campeones Cup, USL Cup champ, Haitian international, and things really haven't worked out for him since his free agent signing in Atlanta, where I thought and many others thought it was going to kind of just be a perfect fit under Gonzalo Pineda. He hasn't really got the chance to play a ton for Atlanta, and I think, definitely moving in a different direction, because we've seen him feature for Atlanta United 2 and MLS Next Pro this season. So I'm glad that he's getting another shot in a team that seems to be playing a little bit better, and I'm excited to see what John Herdman does with Derrick Etienne Jr.
Yeah, I think he could definitely go into that team and make an impact in some ways and get back on it. Like you said, it wasn't perfect scenario in Atlanta. It seemed like it. So fresh spot, improvements, hopefully. So
Yeah, no. And look, John Bergman, he's pulled together right now, I think, Insigne and Bernadeschi. I know they're injured, but he's pulled them together into kind of getting their careers back on track. And, hopefully he can do the same for Etienne.
Hey, he's got Toronto in a playoff spot.
Hey, that's it. He hasn't played much better soccer. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give him all that love and all that credit right there. All right, let's keep moving forward with a bunch of these moves. Let's go with the big one, Jason, because this wasn't a Tom Bogert report. Sorry, Tom, but this was Fabrizio Romano. LAFC have come to terms with current France international and AC Milan striker Olivier Giroud for a summer transfer window signing. It will be reported a 1.5-year contract with another 1.5-year contract option on the back end of it. I mean, I'm not the first person to say it. You won't be the first person to say it. Olivier Giroud to LAFC almost seems like the most absolutely perfect alignment of player and club that we can think of in Major League Soccer. A hold up, back to goal, creative striker that's just going to allow Bouanga, Oliveira, Bogush, and kind of those fun young wingers to do their thing. And I mean, Bouanga especially to just score another 50 goals. But I love the move.
I don't think I think this was heavily rumored for a while. We all kind of knew there was a chance of this. Here it is. I can't really say anything about the move other than this was a great move. LAFC continues to go out and find the players they want and make signings. And, obviously Lloris had something to do with this one, I would say.
Yeah. He's calling
your friends over there. But I mean, at the end of the day, this is a great move for LAFC. It's a team that, again, like obviously with this season, it's not the LAFC that's shattering records like we're used to for a couple of years there, but it's a team that isn't satisfied with being a middle of the pack team. And they clearly have shown that they are not satisfied with ever being a middle of the pack team. So they're going to continue probably to make moves. And this is one of those moves where they go out, they look for the big name that they can fit into their team. And it's not just like a big name for big name, right? It's not always Olivier Giroud coming into the team. It's just, in this case, it is a huge name and one that can definitely come in and help their team. And I think this is just LAFC doing more successful business, honestly.
I mean, literally, right? Like, LAFC, they haven't played the best soccer this year. 3 wins, 3 draws, 3 losses, sitting on 12 points. But it hasn't been awful. I think there's been bad points, but I think there's also been really high points that we've seen from this team. And I only think kind of the addition of Giroud will just improve the positive points of this team and allow them to play a little bit more kind of free-flowing soccer that we've seen from them and what Steve Cherundolo has tried to implement over the last few years. So, I mean, look, there's no way in this world that anyone can sit here and be like, Giroud still doesn't have it. This is a retirement level move. Yes, he's an older player, but the dude's still producing for AC Milan, still producing at the highest levels in the highest leagues in the world. So, I mean, this just seems, like I said, like a perfect matchup. I'm excited to actually see it. And to LAFC's point and to your point, Jason, these are the types of moves that get them back into the top of the conference, top of the league conversation and picture. So
he also I'm pretty sure seems like a likable teammate. Like I've never really heard a bad thing about the guy. So
yeah,
that's just another leader in the dressing room.
For sure. I mean, I also think maybe, get the female population of LA out into LAFC, going to LAFC games as well.
Beautiful man.
The dude's a beautiful dude. I mean, fair enough. It's a great point about him. All right, let's move on. Inter Miami, they continue to just somehow sign people at the same
They got this roster spot from Montreal, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
From what I was reading.
So thank you for that.
This season it was like a allocation money for international roster spot.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but like before you say this move, like I really wish MLS just had like a roster team sheet that had everyone listed and what they were. Like, okay, these are the DPs, these are the international spots. Like it's so difficult to follow. And they really need that on their site.
It would be lovely if transparency on the roster, the transparency on the roster rules is there, but the transparency on the how the actual current day rosters are like, regulated or registered would be nice.
Constructed or whatever. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people, especially like on the fringes that are following MLS, are like, well, how are they doing this? They're breaking all these rules. When I don't necessarily think they all are, but it's just so unclear what's going on that it's like, how, like, genuinely, how are they doing this? But at the same time, like, I don't actually think they're breaking any rules. I think it's just really kind of difficult to understand what's actually going on.
No, and I mean, look, I trust Chris Henderson as one of the best general managers in the league, that he's not going out and breaking rules left and right to construct his roster.
Well, Miami's been in trouble for breaking rules before, right?
I think,
like, at some point you can't, right? Like,
I think
it's not like MLS is just sitting there having no idea. They're not like, oh, how did this signing happen? Like, there are people probably in the office at MLS headquarters or whatever, wherever that's located. I think it used to be in Chicago, but I don't know. Maybe that's just U.S. soccer. Either way, there's somebody in there just like going over these moves and making sure they're viable moves. So I just wanted to make it clear. I'm pretty sure they did acquire this international roster spot from Montreal.
Well, thank you for defending Inter Miami here, Jason. Everyone,
we need more people defending Inter Miami. They don't get talked about enough.
No, not enough. But they are acquiring South American talent just as fast as they are, losing players to the injury report every single week. But Inter Miami have signed free agent attacking midfielder Matias Rojas. The 28-year-old does have 18 caps for the Paraguayan national team. He is a two-time Argentine Super Cup champion, a one-time Paraguay First Division Apertura and Clausura champion. He has 205 career games between Racing Club, Corinthians, Defensa y Justicia, nailed it, Lanús, and Cerro Porteño. So he does have a career 37 goals, 18 assists. I mean, look, you're getting a dude who is in his prime. It's the tail end of his prime, probably at like 28 years old. But he has played for some of the biggest clubs down in South America, with Racing and Corinthians more specifically. And with the injuries to the club that, I do want to bring up injuries overall in Major League Soccer at a certain point, but to the injuries that are going on with this club, I mean, you're going to have to assume he's going to step in as almost an immediate starter to this team.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely talent there, like you're saying. 28 years old, I would argue he's like pretty much right in the middle of his prime, if not maybe towards the end. But I feel like a lot of soccer players kind of have it. Yeah. Messi's going to make everyone better, and Suarez is going to make people better. Like, I think just getting talented players in the team, they're not going to really struggle. It's not like it's bringing him into a team that desperately needs to get someone, to fit a certain role. It's in a team that, you're going to be asking Messi to be the main creator as usual, and he's going to do that job at the highest level, maybe humanly possible. So it's actually one of the probably easier teams to make signings for, not to discredit them, but like, you're making signings going, okay, who's talented, who can fit into our system, that can, at this point, like you're saying, just provide a body, right? Like they have so many people out. They've got, Robert Taylor's out, Diego Gomez just got hurt, Campana's hurt, the list goes on. It's just like a long, long list of injured players. And I think these are solid moves and in good pieces to bring in that can hold it down, are talented enough to hold it down in roles where they're going to be asked probably to do a decent amount, especially, like you're saying, he's coming in, he's probably going to be asked to be playing, potentially 90 minutes week in and week out, at least 50, 60. I don't know. But you're going to need him. And at this point, they need bodies to get people to come back, and at the same time, when players start to get healthy, then you're going to get a deep team that's actually quite dangerous going forward, and more dangerous than they already are.
Once this injury report's like one or two names, I mean, this team's going to be absolutely.
I mean, this team top of the league in point, or tied for the top of the league in points, but top of the conference in points pretty handily. They've scored 22 goals, which is the most in the league. I mean,
look, my only concern with this team is, eventually you do have to rest the Messis, the Suarez's, the Busquets, the Albas of the team. You have to. These guys are there's no denying that they're in the older aspect or the older part of their career, and these guys cannot play, 50 games this season when it comes to CCC, MLS, Leagues Cup, all of it. Like, they just aren't going to be able
even
to do
Gressel can't. Like, I mean, the guy's playing like an absolute Iron Man, but nobody can really do that. And I think the team knows that, though. Like, I think some of these signings are in response to the fact that they know they're going to deal with injuries. They know they have older players on their roster that are more injury prone, or maybe, need a little bit more time in between games than going from, a Wednesday to a Saturday midday game or something like that.
Yeah.
But the rotation is how it's going to work. Like, the way they do it, you're not hopefully going to have Messi, Suarez, Alba, Busquets, all out at the same time. Hopefully, maybe you have Suarez resting, and I mean, it doesn't always work that way, but I think the signings are in the right direction to do that.
For sure. And just to highlight it for listeners, in case you guys don't know, for the most part, Miami have 2 season-ending injuries in Facundo Farias, one of their U22 spots, and Ian Frey. Let's say Sergi Christov, Federico Redondo, Robert Taylor, and Diego Gomez, all I think are confirmed at this point to be out for a few months. Robbie Robinson, Leonardo Campagna, and Jordi Alba out for a few weeks at this point. So, I mean, the list of injuries only piling up again with a little bit of an older squad. So, hopefully a guy like Matias Rojas can come in and provide some depth, or some, just like you said, Jason, just a body out there to give some energy and livelihood to the people running around Suarez, Messi.
I mean, through a quarter of the season, they're at the top of the conference. Even if they have a small drop off, I'm not really that concerned about them missing the playoffs. I think at this point it's about getting healthy for a playoff push, because we know when this team's all healthy, we saw it last year, went from bottom of the league to suddenly ripping off wins. So it's definitely doable. They just are in a much better position now, a quarter away into the season than they were last year, a quarter away into the season. So if they still do have a dip and injuries stack up or whatever as they are, they probably have I think they have a far better chance to kind of take that risk, that like low area a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah. I think the final point that I just want to say about Miami is, right, like, I think they're just at a point of win everything that they're in mode, and if they don't, then it's probably looked at as a failure. Like, it's a high bar, but it's a bar that they've set for themselves. And
you have Messi. The bar is the trophy.
Exactly,
like every trophy.
And they didn't do it with CONCACAF Champions Cup, and that is a failure. I'll sit here and say that, but they go out this past week. They beat Nashville 3-1. Messi has, a brace and an assist, and he's contributing like 3 goals a game at this point. Like, it's ridiculous. At this point,
there's like, why did we even pick awards at the beginning of the season? Why would we try and be smart about it? Like, it should have just been Messi, Messi, Messi.
Is Messi your MVP, or is it Chicho Arango at this point, sir?
Personally, I probably would put Arango, just because of the Messi is got the expectation that he's going to do that. I almost feel like it's unfair, because it's like, Messi's doing this incredible stuff, but we all kind of thought he would be. Whereas like Chicho Arango is like, oh my God, this is crazy, right? 6 assists for him, just 7 and 6 for Messi.
Just because you expect someone to do it doesn't mean that it shouldn't take away from the credentials of it.
I would say it's too early to really make that choice, because I have far more confidence, not to take anything away from Arango, but I have more confidence Messi's going to keep up this pace than Arango is.
Hey, he's the one that shit on you guys 4-0 this past week with what?
All right, you just got to keep bringing it up. It was a great performance. Don't get me wrong. If I was a neutral fan, I would have been like, "Wow, incredible!"
I mean, that's
Instead,
what
I
I'm
was sitting
saying.
there listening to literally every Fire fan just complaining the entire game. Miserable. It was freezing cold, like super windy. No one was happy. The beers weren't doing anything.
Let's move to another miserable fan base right now, the New England Revolution. I mean, they did not have themselves another great weekend, losing on a goal, an amazing backheel goal from Prince Owusu, 1-0. Which, I mean, the game was pretty boring outside of a fantastic Meg backfield goal from a dude who now has like 3 goals in 2 games. So shout out Prince Owusu. But the Revs, they are looking to make some changes, and they have done so just before this window is closing. First, they have acquired center back Xavier Arreaga from the Seattle Sounders for an international roster spot and $75,000 in general allocation money. If you have been watching Major League Soccer for the last few years, you've obviously seen a ton of the Seattle Sounders, and you've seen a ton of Arreaga, the 29-year-old. Won CONCACAF Champions League back in 2022, also won an MLS Cup in 2019, was one of the better players on that Sounders CONCACAF Champions League run. He hasn't played a ton since then. We've seen some inconsistencies. We've seen him fall off from the Ecuador national team. And, Jackson Reagan and Yaimar really have taken over. And the Seattle Sounders center back room is one of the deepest still with his exit. But he now heads over to New England, where I'm going to assume he's going to be the number 1 center back option in a room that has Henry Kessler, Andrew Farrell, Dave Romney, and youngster Santiago Suarez. But he isn't joined alone. They also signed free agent goalkeeper Aljaz Ivacic. The 30-year-old won the MLS's back tournament with the Timbers back in 2020 and was waived by the Timbers before the season after some comments against the club and front office and leadership all of last year for the most part that kind of led to that roster buyout there. But the 30-year-old does have 56 career games played for the Timbers with 9 clean sheets. And I would say in his day, was arguably a top 5 keeper in the league. He comes into a Revs goalkeeping room that now has Earl Edwards Jr., Henrik Ravas, and now Ivacic. And I mean, I don't know where you want to start with this, Jason. I think it's clearly 2 improvements to both kind of spots on their depth chart, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to pull the Revs out of what 2024 has turned into for them.
Yeah, I mean, they have 1 win, 6 losses, and a draw in the season. Right? They've conceded 14 goals, which is, if I were to, it's not like a crazy amount of goals compared to the rest of the league, actually, but they've only scored 5, so that's lowest in the league.
And they had an embarrassing crash out of CONCACAF Champions Cup as well.
Yeah, if you add in those goals, they're like 24 goals conceded now? Like,
maybe more, in all honesty.
Yeah, that was miserable. But I mean, this is 2 major holes in their roster, right? Like, obviously, nothing's really clicking with this team. You could argue it's coaching, players on the field, whatnot. I think this is a step in the right direction, somewhat out of desperation in some ways, that they need to get something out of the season. At least they're trying, I think, in my opinion. But also 5 goals for, and at least 2 of those were just absolute beauties from Carles. Like,
yeah, and he hasn't even looked himself in recent weeks. He's not getting on the ball. I mean, again, when the team around you is not performing, but still.
Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, you're talking 3, or 2 goals to 5 goals total, and 2 of them were like just a one-man MVP type goal. Yeah. Whereas that's just a bad look. Like, I think these are good moves, but they aren't going to be enough, in my opinion, to just suddenly change the team from a wooden spoon contender to a playoff contender. I don't even think they're approaching the point of no return in terms of at least even getting to the 9 seed or spot or whatever in the standings. So I think what?
No, I said yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's the biggest issue is it's like, putting tape on a sinking boat, might kind of help it a little bit, but you're still going to sink, right, eventually. So hopefully maybe there's more to come. Maybe there's some midfielder or attacking mid or attacking help somewhere out there that they can look to. But I think at the moment, like, at least they're trying, as some other teams that are quite bad aren't. I don't know. I don't think it's going to just suddenly switch this team around completely.
I'll leave it at this in the sense of I don't think the Revs are one of the top 5, 6, 7 teams in the Eastern Conference, and I'm looking at it more of fully healthy roster. I don't think this, because you do have to take into consideration Brandon Bai. He's been out since last season. Dylan Barrero, he's been out since last season. So hopefully they get both of those guys back soon, but they're coming off long-term injuries. How much time does it take to get them to like a previous form of themselves that we saw that was top of their position in the league? DeJuan Jones, he's injured, and he, was asked to do a lot on this team, especially when Brandon Bai went out. So it's the fact of there are injuries. I don't think Henrik Ravas has been, the replacement.
What he said he was going to be.
Yeah, he hasn't been what he said he's going to be. I don't think anyone from the group of Andrew Farrell, Henry Kessler, Dave Romney have really stepped up to be a consistent center back. So hopefully Arreaga can be that kind of guy. But look, there's holes, there's injuries. Noel Buck and Esmir, eventually I'm going to have to learn this kid's last name because he's a huge talent and will probably hopefully play for the U.S. But Esmir out on the wing, I think they've been injured on and off, so it hasn't been great.
Baraktarevic?
It's Baharaktarevic. Pretty sure.
Baharaktarevic.
It'll come. But and Gabriel Giacomo Veroni hasn't been a DP level striker. They haven't had that DP level striker since Adam Buxa was sold to Ligue 1. So there's issues outside of just injuries, and I think there's issues in the way this roster was constructed. And I would like to give Caleb Porter more than just one off season and one window to do his thing to try to fix it and to get some of these guys back healthy, but it's just it's not good right now up in the New England area, and I don't expect it to get any better.
This is a team that was arguably top 5 team in MLS even most of last year.
I was gonna say, not that long ago.
The wheels fell off with some sketchy Bruce Arena stuff that for some reason, it wasn't bad enough for him to be suspended for super long, because I'm pretty sure he's already been reinstated, but also it was bad enough for it to happen to begin with. So who knows what happened there? But I don't think it was him, patching up all these holes. And obviously there's been some injuries, but this team, I had them in the top of the top 3, I want to say, in our predictions, which I obviously is way wrong. But I think the talent on the team on paper, fully strength team, is not a bad team. And I think if this team was really clicking and they made these moves, I'd be like, wow, these are some very good moves to help a team that's already doing well. I think for some reason there's holes all over this team. I don't know if it's residual fallout from last year's end of season shenanigans, but there's something going on. It still feels like in New England that I don't know if we're getting the whole story here, because I actually do think Caleb Porter isn't this bad of a coach. I personally think I've seen him have success elsewhere, and I've seen what he can do with multiple teams, and it's not a one win, 6 losses and a draw through 8 weeks.
To me, it's less about the points and the record. It's more just about how, I guess it does roll 8. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's just about how bad that they've looked. But let's move on, because there is some fun stuff to talk about. And I'm just going to quickly read through some of these other moves.
We're going slow today.
We're slow. It's fine. So I'm just going to run through some of these really quickly. So again, interrupt me if you have anything you want to say, but I think these are pretty minor moves in the larger grand scheme of it. But RSL, they've acquired center back Philip Quinton from the Columbus Crew for $150,000 in general allocation money. 24-year-old center back. he was part of that like 2022 MLS Next Pro champion group with Crew 2. RSL obviously having some center back injury issues. I'm pretty sure Marcelo Silva, Eric Holt, and I'm pretty sure one other center back are all out for the season. Justin Glad and Brian Vera out for a few weeks. So center back reinforcements are needed, and Philip Quinton hopefully can, similar to maybe Miami here, just be a body. The Vancouver Whitecaps, they've signed right back Giuseppe Bovalina from Australian side Adelaide United FC. 19-year-old, does have a cap for Australia's U23 side. Only really has 23 career games to his resume, but he looks to be somewhat of a promising right wing back, right midfielder that can kind of play in Vanni Sartini's system there. I don't know, maybe he's the hopeful what Richie Laryea was supposed to be last year type of deal. The Houston Dynamo, they also made 2 more moves. They signed defensive midfielder Jefferson Valverde from Quito in Ecuador. Not a ton of games under his belt at 24 years old, but he does, he has played for Quito, which is a pretty significant team down in South America. He did win the Copa Sudamericana with them, kind of just adding and bolstering a lower midfield kind of block of Ache, Artur, Jan Gregus, Luis Caicedo, Brooklyn Reigns and company down there. And Houston, they also went out and acquired McKinzie Gaines from Nashville SC, 26-year-old winger. Never really made sense for me in Nashville because they don't usually use traditional wingers under Gary Smith's system, and he hasn't played a ton. He did score a goal this season, but that was in CONCACAF Champions League. And, now he's going to kind of go to Houston and bolster some winger depth that they need behind Ibrahim Aliahu, Coco Carrasquilla, kind of Brad Smith playing up there as a left wing back, I guess I would say. But those are just some moves, and I'm sure by the time this episode comes out, there will be a few more that we haven't had a chance to talk about. Jason, let's get to probably the most important game that is going to come up by the time this episode drops and we talk about it, and it is the Columbus Crew taking on Monterrey in CONCACAF Champions Cup. We talked about it a little bit, so I'm not going to say let's dive super deep, but do you think Columbus hosting on the 24th today can and will get the job done? Those are 2 separate questions.
Yes. I think when we talked about Columbus, I don't know, 2 weeks ago after they moved on over
Tigres.
Yeah, Tigres. I think it was like this team is kind of the class of MLS at the moment, is kind of rightfully in this Final Four semifinal. Monterrey, at that point when we were talking about them, we still kind of had hope for Miami, as we typically do for MLS teams in the competition. But yes, I think I didn't pull up the Liga MX standing, but I don't think there's a huge difference. I actually think Monterrey might be lower down than Tigres.
I think,
the last time I looked, but I think it's about mentality. I think a lot of this competition, especially when you go to Mexico, is about the mentality you take in, because it feels like a lot of times MLS teams go in a little bit scared or not willing to necessarily take it to the Mexican side. Whereas, we see these results that they go down a goal, they go down a second goal, they go down a third, it kind of like compounds itself. And I think when you have a coach like Nancy, like that's just not really acceptable. So personally, I think 100% they can win this game. They can get a result, they can win it. So they can go into Mexico with a lead. And I think, personally, in my opinion, I think they kind of not necessarily have to. No, I think they sort of have to, because I think we've seen it enough times where, and I've mentioned this a million times, I feel like I've said this sentence a million times, you get the draw at your home stadium and you go to Mexico and you get smashed. And it's just one of those things that's like, we can't be happy with the draw anymore, because we've seen enough times, it's like, fool me once, maybe, but like fool me for the 30th time in a row. Like, no, a draw at that point isn't really an acceptable result, even for a team like Columbus, who we've seen win in Mexico now. But like the sample size is 90, right? Like it's still like impossible to do. So I think, will, I also think that they will win in Columbus, because I think the combination of the coaching, the players, the performances they've put together on the field, as well as just like being at home, Columbus does have that, a solid fan base that's going to come up for this on Wednesday night, and show up. And I think, again, like, they're going to be a confident side going into this game after what they did down in Mexico. The way they were able to take kind of like an early bump, or major bump, in that game, and come out of the game on top. That's just one of those things that you don't see out of many teams. And you really only see out of teams who have like that mentality that can be champions. So, I think they will, and I think they have to.
I agree with you in part of what you just said. I think they have to win. This is a must win. You need to have the advantage to go down to Mexico to get it done. I'm not saying, they can't replicate what they did against Tigres, but what they did against Tigres was absolutely special and doesn't happen always. And I don't know if that can happen twice in the same tournament. So I think Columbus can do it. Now, I think they come away with a draw, but I don't think that they come away with the win that's needed. This is a special team with a special manager, a special striker, special DP, special homegrowns. Like, this team is going to be talked about in the histories, the historical conversations of Major League Soccer, for sure, from multiple perspectives. But I don't know if this team can handle Monterrey, who have eliminated so far FC Cincinnati and Inter Miami, for two of the better teams in the league. And it's not like Columbus is firing on all cylinders in league play. And sure, maybe the focus is on CCC right now, but I have my concerns. I think they have to win tonight. And by the time this episode drops, we'll know the answer. The listeners will know the answer, but I think they have to win. And I think they can get it done, but I'll give them the same odds that I think, they win into the Tigres aggregate with. It's not high, but I think they can do it.
I think, at least, like, maybe this is crazy, but I think personally, I would rather see them go into this game and fight for the win and potentially lose going forward in attack than just settling for a draw. Because I've seen it enough times. Like, I don't want them to go, oh, it's 1-1. We're in the 80th minute. Let's just see this out and go to Mexico. I don't want to see that. Like, I've seen it before. I've seen that story. I want them to say, oh, it's 1-1. We're in the 80th minute. Let's fight for 10 plus whatever the extra added time would be. And really take it to Tigres for these final 10 minutes and see if they can get a goal and sneak away with a win. Like, I don't think it's going to be dominant. Like, again, Monterrey has looked very good. Brendan Vasquez knows MLS teams, knows Columbus, has played there before. His going back to Ohio, which is where he played for a while.
No, for sure.
And has been in many games against Columbus that are pretty high stakes, obviously, with, like you said, with Hell is Real. So I think, like, this is not a game where you can just kind of sit there and be content with the draw. Like, I think what you're saying is they could definitely get a draw, right? Like, I think we can sit here and say, are they good enough to get a draw? Definitely. I think they're good enough to get a win, but I think they really are going to have to go all in for that. I don't know. Like, if they go all in and end up conceding in a 1-1 game, final 10 minutes, I'm not going to sit here and be like so distraught, because I think that's the right thing to do. I think you have to go in and really go for that win, because if you go down to Mexico basically 0-0, like, I don't know. I've seen that story too many times.
Exactly. You're going to maybe need to get lucky on PKs to move forward. And I'm not calling the Crew lucky or this run lucky. This is a great team, but you do need a little luck when it comes to these things. And I think MLS teams even more when it comes down to it. But just to kind of transition away from CONCACAF Champions Cup and just quickly mention the two other tournament competitions that are going on right now for MLS teams. The U.S. Open Cup, we're into the round of 32. The MLS teams that are playing in this tournament, this version of it in 2024, are entering now into this round, and we're having some pretty cool matchups, I would say, with some of the better USL Championship teams facing off against some MLS sides like Louisville City. Jason, your pick for winning it all. They're taking on Seattle.
I'm still rolling with it.
Houston's taking on Detroit City. RSL's taking on New Mexico United. So there are those 8 MLS teams. You got 20 USL Championship teams, 3 USL League One teams, and we got the one MLS Next Pro team, NYCFC 2, the Baby Pigeons. They're taking on Colorado Springs Switchback. So I'm excited to watch that one. But
yeah, I'm really excited. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if you're going to move on, but I just want to say that I think these matchups we got are pretty incredible, honestly. Like across the board, like a lot of these matchups are really solid USL Championship teams going up against MLS teams. And I think like what happens if they, 5, 6 MLS teams go out in this round? Like how awkward would that be?
If we're talking more than half of these MLS teams lose in this round, man, I don't know. That's bad. But I guess we'll see.
Horrible.
we'll see, what these lineups look like, because I think that is an interesting point. And look, we still have another week before we see these games or so. So we'll get to that when we'll get to that. We'll dramatically freak out once one MLS loses at that point. The other competition that is starting this week is the Canadian Championship. Definitely a much smaller competition in terms of number of teams in the competition, but it is Canada's home domestic cup here. And in the first round, the preliminary round, Toronto FC, they are the only of the 3 MLS Canadian teams to play in it. So TFC, they are going to be taking on a non-professional side, Simcoe County Rovers FC. So shout out TFC. And if you lose this, I'll be having some field days with this next week. But
I don't know, man. Even if they lose this, like I feel like I've talked enough shit about that team that they've proved me wrong already. So I'm not gonna say anything. I'll just let them have that one.
I mean, to be fair, that's sure, but
they've definitely surpassed any of my expectations for the season already. And I'm sitting over here with a team that literally cannot score a goal to save their lives.
The wind helped you guys score your biggest goal of the year, but it's fine. There's not a lot of time left on this episode, so I do have at the bottom of our notes here, Jason. It was a week in Major League Soccer where we saw some massive road wins. We also saw some pretty cool games in terms of like the 100th Cali Classico with LA and San Jose. Is there a game from this past week that you just want to mention that it was a huge result, huge performance, anything like that is just intriguing to you from the last week?
Yeah, I mean, I think Vancouver over Seattle is just another. You have Ryan Gauld and Brian White scoring in that game. They're again just having a carryover from last season where they really picked up steam, and now they're going into the season just scoring in bunches. It feels like, and have a very good connection. I think again Seattle, who we had expectations for, has really also, like Miami, actually seen a decent amount of injuries already start adding on. I think, it's maybe not a full strength amazing Seattle team, but it's still a big win for them. Was that on? Yeah, that was on the road too. So like just winning there in general is difficult. So like, regardless of who you're playing against, like whatever side Seattle's putting out, that's not an easy place to go and to win. And in Vancouver continues to somewhat keep the pace with LA Galaxy in first, and Salt Lake right behind them. So yeah, I think that's probably the game that I was like, wow, they are for real.
The Caps are good. Obviously, they lost the Galaxy 2 weeks ago at this point, and I think that was probably going to be a pretty deciding result at the end of the year if these two teams can kind of keep up this pace. But the Sounders, I'm concerned about. Yes, I know you've mentioned some injuries with De La Vega. Joao Paulo's been in and out. Stephen Fry was out for the first few weeks of the season and stuff like that. But this is a team sitting on 6 points through 8 games.
Yeah.
Like this is the point where I'm like, okay, this isn't just early season. They still are working it out. Some guys coming into form, blah, blah, blah. This is you're 8 games in, and the Sounders are playing like one of the worst teams in all of Major League Soccer. So I don't want to dive too deep on it. I probably could, but I think this is a certain point where now it's kind of like you have to look in-house. You just lost this past weekend, 2 red cards. Both the Alex Roldan red card was absolutely like, that was awful. That was just a frustration red card. And, these bad performances and kind of bad vibes throughout the locker room are things that just build up. And I don't know. I have my concerns for Seattle kind of falling into bottom of the Western Conference for a majority of the season type of feelings.
I think they can right it a little bit. I think when you look at just like they've only conceded 9 times, which is really on par with a lot of playoff teams at the moment, and have that even goal differential with goal. Like I think they just need. I think the vibes. You're right. They aren't great. And it doesn't look amazing for Seattle at the moment. But I don't think it's like. I think it's too early to cut them out, especially a Seattle team that can definitely just go on a run here and end up back in the playoffs as they typically just always are. So I kind of give them a little bit of slack, but yeah, the longer this goes on, the worse it gets. And they have who? They have DC this week. So I mean, you pick up 3 points, you're right back in it, like
No, I mean, there's still definitely time. I'm not saying that there's not. I just don't know if right now, especially with comments that Schmetzer's even made of, this is some of the worst performances that I've seen, and Schmetzer's literally been there since the Siggy Schmidt days.
Light that fire, Schmetzer. Light that fire.
Hey, he can do it. He's definitely proven himself enough as a manager and in this continent to do it. But I'm just saying, I have my concerns. The other game and the other team that I just want to give some shout out to is Minnesota United, the Loons. I mean, Eric Ramsey, I don't know what expectations I had for him, but I mean, he's blown past every single one of them. I would say, the way that these guys kind of just possess the ball and I think definitely seem to have a very high level of trust in one another, from the midfield group to that back line that's still performing excellent, by the way. And then now getting up into the attack where you have a guy like Tani Oluwase starting and scoring. Robin Ludd, I think I put it out on Twitter this past weekend, is the most underrated player in all of Major League Soccer. He had a goal and 2 assists in this game. I think at all levels, this team is very confident, very trusting. And that's, without Emmanuel Reynoso, who looks like he'll never play a game, for Minnesota United.
Yeah.
He literally missed his green card meeting to come back to the United States. So I think it's done. Michael Boxall's come out and said that they don't need him, all this stuff. And I just have to say, I think if you want to talk about the complete opposite of the Sounders and positive vibes in a locker room, I think the Loons have to be having that right now from the front office down. I mean, they seem to have knocked the sporting director hire out of the park, manager hire out of the park, and the core and the group that they have. I mean, they're playing some fantastic soccer this season.
I mean, it's awesome. I think Eric Ramsey, hopefully he's there long term, but the way this is going, he might not be there that long.
He's going back.
He has so much trust in this team, in his players, to start Tani Oluwase and then immediately get that goal from him, which was a beautiful goal, by the way.
Yes.
And just the way this team, he has them playing. I mean, we forget, before the season that we were talking about, who's going to be the manager? Is there enough time? Are they waiting too long? They got their guy, and he did not need a long time to get this team on the same page. It's almost like when we say, okay, let's wait. I still believe, when a new coach comes in, you got to give them some time. You don't get this type of response this quickly. And it's, there are the new coach bumps, that come in and kind of boost the team a little bit. That's not what this is. This is across the board buy-in and really strong play without Emmanuel Reynoso, like you mentioned, who I'm sure they expected to have going into this season. And again, just kind of at this point, they don't need him. At this point, it's probably better to just leave that drama behind and move on. Let this team just continue to do well, get results, and really connect. And that's exactly what they're doing.
I just want to finish up the Minnesota United talk with just, I'm excited to see what Eric Ramsey can do with probably, the summer transfer window and off-season transfer window. If Reynoso is officially off the books, 2 open DP spots, and what he can really pull together for his team, because this isn't even really his team at this point. Like it's going to be exciting things for Minnesota United, where I know you and I both had our concerns, but look, if Eric Ramsey's even deciding to go back to England at this point, they have a salary cap. What a joke of a league. Like, fuck them, like, just stay in MLS. But look, anything else you want to finish up this episode with before, that corny Eric Ramsey joke is the last thing that's said on this podcast?
I'll just say Minnesota, like, they have completely filled all my doubts up, like none left. Yeah. Like they're cruising, and it's fun to see. So good for Minnesota.
I'm going to say this. Congrats to the Galaxy on winning the 100th Cali Classico. I'm going to just throw this out there in the universe. Congratulations to the Columbus Crew on winning against Monterrey in CONCACAF Champions Cup. And thank you to everyone who listened, watched. We'll catch up with you guys next week to talk more about CONCACAF Champions Cup, MLS in the week that was, and probably any other moves that have happened. But until then, see y'all later.